Welcome back to Skytech-Lens. The summer of 2025 brought a jolt to global trade as President Trump slapped a sweeping 35% tariff on Canadian goods, escalating tensions far beyond the earlier 25% duties. The European Union, facing similar threats, quickly struck a deal, a reduced 15% tariff in exchange for major U.S. investment commitments, a pragmatic move to avoid deeper disruption. In contrast, Canada chose resistance. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government refused to accept a quick compromise, seeing the tariffs as a threat to the rules-based trading order. Ottawa argued that caving in would only encourage future U.S. strong-arm tactics, undermining the USMCA and setting a dangerous precedent. Instead of seeking a side deal, Canada dug in, signaling a long-term strategy rather than a short-term fix. Canadian officials made it clear they would not be pressured into a deal that compromised national interests or existing agreements. This stance invited economic pain and political risk. But Carney's team believed it was the only way to secure a stable, predictable partnership with the U.S. The EU's rapid agreement prioritized stability, but Canada's resistance marked a fundamental divergence in how to handle American economic leverage. The world watched as Canada challenged the notion that capitulation was the only viable response to U.S. pressure. The stage was set for a high-stakes diplomatic standoff, with Canada betting on principle over expedience. The contrast was stark. Europe de-escalated, while Canada prepared for a drawn-out fight. The outcome would test the limits of American power and Canadian resolve. At the heart of Canada's response was the Carney doctrine: defend sovereign economic interests, even at the cost of short-term pain. Carney's team, including Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc and Ambassador Kirsten Hillman, saw the 2026 USMCA review as Canada's real leverage point. By refusing side deals, Canada preserved its bargaining power for this critical negotiation, aiming to argue that U.S. tariffs violated the spirit of the agreement. This patient, principled approach marked a sharp break from past Canadian strategies that prioritized immediate harmony with Washington. The government's message was clear: Canada is a reliable partner, but it won't be bullied. The risk was real, businesses would suffer. But the belief was that short-term pain was better than a permanent disadvantage. Canada's long game aimed to reset the terms of its most important relationship, betting that its quiet strengths would ultimately outweigh U.S. pressure. It was a bold gamble on patience, discipline, and the power of rules. Canada's confidence rested on the deep integration of North American supply chains. Parts and materials crossed the border multiple times. Tariffs on Canadian goods often meant higher costs for American manufacturers. The auto sector was hit hard. Tariffs on Canadian parts raised costs for U.S. assembly plants, making American cars less competitive. U.S. construction and manufacturing also suffered from higher prices on Canadian lumber, steel, and aluminum. Canadian negotiators quietly highlighted these consequences, leveraging mutual dependence. Canada also leaned on USMCA's dispute settlement mechanisms, reinforcing its image as a nation of law and order. Legal challenges bogged down the U.S. while Canada played the long game. Beyond supply chains, Canada reminded Washington of its role as the largest, most secure energy supplier to the U.S., a critical point in an unstable world. The message disrupting this partnership hurts both sides. Canada's intricate economic ties became both shield and sword in the trade conflict. Mutual dependence, not just market access, was Canada's real leverage. Canada's unified negotiating team stood in sharp contrast to the mixed signals from Washington. President Trump's public bluster was undercut by private, pragmatic talks between U.S. officials and their Canadian counterparts. This internal U.S. disarray gave Canada the space to pursue its patient strategy. While Trump downplayed the dispute for his base, Commerce Secretary Lutnick and Trade Representative Greer kept lines open with Ottawa. Canada focused on the measured, professional dialogue, ignoring inflammatory rhetoric. The Canadian team, led by Carney, LeBlanc, and Hillman, spoke with one voice, disciplined and consistent. Meanwhile, the U.S. government appeared divided, weakening its negotiating position. Political turmoil in Washington, high-profile firings and resignations, added to the sense of instability. For Canada, this chaos reinforced the wisdom of waiting for a more stable partner. Negotiating with a disorganized counterpart risked deals being reversed overnight. By betting on the long-term framework of the USMCA, Canada hoped for a more coherent U.S. approach down the line. Ottawa's patience was rewarded by Washington's confusion. Withstanding a 35% tariff from its largest trading partner hit Canada hard, especially in steel, aluminium, lumber, and autos. Some businesses cushioned the blow by preloading shipments, but the relief was short-lived. GDP growth slowed, and mills in Hamilton and Sault Ste. Marie scrambled for new buyers. The government responded quickly, launching the Large Enterprise Tariffs loan facility to help major companies avoid layoffs. Ottawa also imposed targeted retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, maximizing political pressure while minimizing harm to Canadians. The Carney government moved to strengthen the domestic economy, advancing the One Canadian Economy Act to break down interprovincial trade barriers. The goal: create a more resilient, integrated domestic market to reduce vulnerability. Federal support and smart retaliation signaled that Canada would not absorb the blows passively. The message to Washington was clear: Canada could absorb pain and fight back. The trade war forced Canada to rethink and reinforce its economic foundations. While Ottawa led the diplomatic fight, provinces launched their own countermeasures. Ontario, hit hardest by auto tariffs, expanded trade with China and banned certain U.S. liquors in government stores. Breweries shifted to Chinese aluminum, adapting supply chains in real time. Alberta, as a major energy producer, hinted at targeted actions to remind the U.S. of its leverage. Quebec reviewed procurement contracts to favor local or non-U.S. suppliers, insulating its economy. These tailored provincial actions created a multi-front response, showing unity of purpose across Canada. Despite political differences, provinces and Ottawa shared a goal: reduce dependence on the U.S. market. Provincial pushback strengthened Canada's negotiating hand, signaling to Washington that resistance was nationwide. The trade dispute galvanized a coordinated federation-wide response. The trade dispute sparked a quiet but powerful wave of economic nationalism in Canada. Polls showed 91% of Canadians wanted to reduce reliance on the U.S., a rare moment of national unity. This wasn't anti-Americanism, but a pragmatic desire for stability and self-determination. The public's resolve gave the Carney government crucial support to hold firm. Calls for quick capitulation faded. Instead, Canadians rallied around the idea of standing up for themselves. The dispute, meant to divide, instead fostered a stronger sense of shared identity. A Buy Canadian movement gained traction, and businesses began rethinking supply chains. The push for diversification became a bottom-up movement, not just government policy. Canada's economic orientation was quietly but fundamentally shifting. Every move Canada made was aimed at the 2026 USMCA review, the ultimate leverage point. The review allows any partner to refuse renewal, putting the entire agreement at risk. By refusing a side deal, Canada kept the tariff issue alive for the main negotiation. Ottawa's argument: U.S. tariffs violated the spirit of the USMCA and must be addressed for the agreement to endure. Canada aimed to demand stronger dispute mechanisms and clearer tariff rules. Patience was a tactical plan, not weakness. Canada bet that U.S. businesses would push for resolution as costs mounted. Coordination with Mexico strengthened Canada's position. Isolating the U.S. international critics of the EU's quick deal lent credibility to Canada's approach. By fighting on the legal ground of the USMCA, Canada trusted in process over personality. The outcome of the review would shape North American trade for years to come. As autumn 2025 arrives, Canada's gamble is clear. Trade short-term certainty for the chance at a more stable, equitable partnership. The question: will patience pay off, or will economic pain force a retreat? Canada's integrated supply chains and unified government give it leverage, while U.S. disarray weakens Washington's hand. Public support and provincial action have turned a trade dispute into a moment of national resolve. The coming months will reveal if Canada's stand can shift the dynamic, or if the USMCA review will decide the continent's economic future. Canada's strategy is a bet on rules, resilience, and self-reliance. Win or lose, Canada has chosen to play the long game, and may be rewriting the rules of North American trade. Thanks for watching a video, and subscribe to the channel now. Thanks.